And welcome back to the ARCA Racing Podcast. I'm your host, Starton Parker, aka Colby Evans. We are glad to be back for our very first ARCA East episode of 2023. Yes, the ARCA East Series is running their first race of the 2023 season. This is not about the main series, not about the West Series. We're talking about the East boys. We got a pretty decent-sized field compared to what a lot of us were expecting, and a lot of actual potential title contenders for this season. And a lot of people thought this might be an easy championship for the 18 car again. But as we will talk about more in the show, it might not be as easy as we thought. We're going to go through our little intro. We have a pretty big show for you guys at the as a whole today. We're just going over the preview for this weekend's race at Five Flags Speedway. So you guys know the drill, of course. Follow me on social media, Twitter at Starton Park Car. If you're a fan of the lower budget team news in the top 3 NASCAR divisions and ARCA news as a whole, I am your guy just to come for that news because I like to. That's my favorite stuff to report on. We just hit over 4,400 followers, so the goal is to get to 4,500 eventually, and then to the big 5,000. Check out theracingexperts.com for all NASCAR media content and articles. So let's get right into it, shall we? The ARCA East Series, this has been considered basically since the merger started to be the lower tier of the 3 ARCA series, and rightfully so. You know, in 2020, the series only ran 6 races. Obviously, a lot of that was due to COVID, but only 6 races in 2020, only about less than 10 races in 2021 and last year as well. And it's hard to get behind that series in particular. When we had the Sioux Chief Showdown, there just wasn't a lot of interest to run that circuit because I think the biggest problem is that the Sioux Chief Showdown was its own championship in the main division. You did not have to be 18 years old to run that division. So for a lot of young teams or young drivers looking to get into the series, rather than spend the money to run the East Circuit, they would just spend the money to run the Sioux Chief Showdown. You'd get to run with the big league teams, the big league drivers of ARCA, and on some of the bigger tracks as well. But obviously, the Sioux Chief Showdown was canceled after 2022, will not be returning this year. And to an extent, it has appeared to have worked to drum up interest in the East Series division for this season. You guys did notice as well, we did not have our usual season opening race at New Smyrna, which usually takes place right before the ARCA race on usually the Tuesday right before. It kicks off a whole week of racing at New Smyrna Speedway. Lots of different reasons why to that. Some reports I heard of, they didn't want ARCA back. Financially, it wasn't good. The track was not in good enough condition following the hurricane, which I don't know. I think that was the least true because they were running that week anyway. Like the track was operating just fine. I didn't think it was a good spot for that season opener. I could understand why they wanted to put that before the Daytona race, trying to attract the Daytona fans to come in. And it did always got a good-sized crowd. I mean, the New Smyrna ARCA East race always got a good crowd for what New Smyrna brings in for a crowd. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a good fit. You didn't get a lot of full-time ARCA East teams. Usually you would get about 4 or 5 actual ARCA East teams, and then the rest would be made up by full-season teams looking to make a quick buck before Daytona hit. So that race was canned, and Pensacola, which was usually the second race of the season, will now be the first race. The ARCA East season as a whole will have 8 races, 4 standalones. The first one this weekend at Pensacola, the usual big race at Dover, the Nashville Fairgrounds, the big event at Flat Rock. That event's scheduled to bring in over 30 cars. And then we have our combo races with the main division at Iowa, IRP, Milwaukee, and our finale, which has been the primary the last couple years at Bristol. So that is the ARCA East Series season. My opinions on the series, again, it can work. I feel like that we need to get the series back up to where the West Series is at least 11 to 13 races, in my opinion, and we need to go to different tracks. I like the idea of combo races, but when it's half the schedule, again, the incentive to run full-time East over the primary series, I just don't feel like it's enough. There's not enough incentive. You got to run tracks like, oh God, I can't think of. I know there's a lot of tracks on the East Coast, but none can't come to my head right now because I'm so in thought about this. But you guys understand what I'm saying? Like, they need to run at tracks that the main series does not. And I feel like if you would run at tracks that the main series does not, you could drum up more interest. You could drum up more opportunities for the young kids. So guys like, okay, they're racing at different tracks than the main series would be at. But when you're only racing at a couple of different tracks where the main series is, that's just not a good fit. It really, in reality, it just isn't. And I feel like that's why we're seeing low incentive to run the East Division, because at least with the West Division, I mean, they're running at all different kinds of tracks compared to the main division. They only have one combo race every year, and it's at a West Series affiliated track anyway. So I feel like that's, in a lot of ways, that's what's wrong with the East Circuit. I think it can work. It just needs a lot of restructuring on how it's used. But in particular, we are talking about Pensacola. It's a very fun track. It's where the Snowball Derby is run every year. It's a very, very fun racetrack. A lot of drivers will say it's one of their favorite short tracks in the southern part of the U.S. I myself have never been there. I would like to go sometime. Obviously, the Snowball Derby, I feel like, should be on everyone's bucket list of races to go to, even if it's gotten a little funky the last couple of years. I think the Snowball Derby should be a top 10 for all. Last year's race as a whole, though, we only had 16 cars show up. Again, this is last year's. We had 16 cars show up. Of course, though, probably one of the bigger moments of that weekend was Benny Chastain in his last ARCA appearance, crashed in qualifying, destroyed the car, and I believe his license was revoked after that. So that was Benny Chastain's last appearance. We only had 15 cars for the race. We had 4 starting parks. We only had 11 full race cars. And albeit it was still a pretty decent battle up front. We had the 18 of Sammy Smith, of course, the 02 of Leland Honeyman, and the 17 of Taylor Gray. They all three actually put on a halfway decent show for what the ARCA series was capable of. And in the end, Sammy Smith came out on top. Leland Honeyman was second. Taylor Gray was third. But there wasn't a lot of action behind them. It was pretty boring behind the field. Jake Finch was kind of the other, wondering, but he had tire issues. Overall, the race last year, it was the best E-Series race of 2022, but it wasn't setting a very big bar, and the E-Series standalone races just kind of got worse as they went along. So I really hope that this weekend is a sign of things to come for the E-Series, and we can finally really start saying some positive things, because as you guys know, man, I try to be as positive as I possibly can be. But man, when a race is bad and it's not going very well, believe me, I will call it out. And we did have some ARCA East races last year that were plainly just no good, like just flat out no good. This race, though, I believe has potential. Like I said, I really believe we're in for a good year in the ARCA East series. We have a lot of full-time competitors, and it's not going to be just, I feel like, a runaway. When William Sawalich was announced for the 18 full-time ARCA East, I think a lot of people just automatically gave the championship to, William and the 18 team for 3 years in a row. But I actually don't believe that. We have a lot of full-time contenders for the E-Series championship. They are as follows. This is no in particular order. The 12 of D.L. Wilson. Now, of course, put an asterisk to that because he was injured in his heavy crash at Phoenix. So put an asterisk to that, but he was supposed to be full-time East. Luke Fenhouse, who's been a mainstay at the Slinger track. He's racing for the Pinnacle Racing Group. That's where Shane Huffman is now. The former guy who worked for Brett Holmes, Shane Huffman, is now over there. So Luke Fenhouse in the 28. LeVar Scott, who ran very well at Daytona, will be driving the 6 for Rev Racing. The kid who just won his first West Series race, Tyler Riff, for Loden Jackson Motorsports in the 41. Zachary Tinkle will be the other teammate to D.L. Wilson in the 11 for Fast Track Racing. Of course, the 18 for William Sawalich. Rise Motorsports with Rita Goulet, the former Rita Thomason. She got married in the offseason. Shear Speed Racing, yes, Dale Shear. You guys remember him, one of the prominent ARCA backmarkers. He'll be running full-time East. And got a lot of heavy hitters in that group. Luke Fenhouse, LeVar Scott, and Sean Hingorani, I feel like will be definite competitors towards the 18's championship. So for everyone who's just handing the championship flat out to the 18 right away, I don't see it like that. I don't see it like that at all. I think a lot of these guys, it's probably the most competitive championship field we've had for ARCA East. And I'm actually quite excited to see what these guys do in these standalone races. But with how many competitive full-time East guys we have, when we get to races like Iowa, and Milwaukee, I feel like those are going to be the tracks that are really test these guys because they're not the short tracks. Iowa, Dover, and Milwaukee will be the biggest tracks these guys race on, and that'll be the biggest test for these guys. But I really think it's going to be a good season. I don't see the 18 running away with it. And if he does, if the 18 does win the championship this year, I don't believe he will win it by much. I don't think it's going to be a runaway victory, and that's good to see. But our entry list, so those were our full-timers, but in general, our full-time entry list for this weekend's race at Pensacola is 16 cars, same as last year until we had that car withdrawn after qualifying crash. So, 16 cars again. And for a standalone ARCA East race, it's about what I expected. I didn't expect 25. I didn't expect 10. Pretty decent field for what I expected out of our debut. Then this is going down in order. We got the 6 of LeVar Scott, the 10 of Ed Pompa, the 11 of Zachary Tinkle. Tim Monroe, Fast Track Racing crew member, will be running the 12. He'll be crew chiefing his own car, which is even better. Sean Hingorani, of course, in the 15. William Sawalich in the 18. Jake Finch in the 20. And that makes me wonder, is Venturini running a second full-time East entry with possible multiple drivers? Because you got to think, if they're running the 20 in this race, more than likely the 20 is going to be at Flat Rock too, because that's going to be a huge event. And the 4 remaining races, I got to believe that Venturini will have at least 2 bullets at every ARCA East race. Plus, it could be easy as well. They're running, if they bring one hauler, they just got to bring one hauler with 2 cars in it. So reality, it wouldn't even be that expensive to bring a second car to the track as long as that car, of course, had sponsorship. Great seeing Jake Finch back again. Showed a lot of promise with the Phoenix Racing team last year. And obviously, I think the Venturini cars are a little bit of a step up from that organization. And yeah, just another great entry. Not full-time, but another great entry to add to the excitement for the weekend. Of course, Luke Fenhouse in the 28, Rita Goulet in the 31. Rise Motorsports actually did do testing at Hickory with Rita, Derek McGraw Jr., and Stephen Light. Also kind of a cool thing for Rise Motorsports. The team is owned by Tim Goulet, former Mike Harmon racing crew member, and Sebastian LaFord. You guys might remember him. He is the Wookie Drives YouTube channel and was the former full-time gas man and mechanic for MBM Motorsports and later Alpha Prime Racing. So that's kind of cool to see Seabass back in racing, even if it's just ARCA. Tyler Riff, of course, Loudon Jackson, and they are entering in his teammate, the 46 of RJ Smotherman, another driver who's affiliated with Loudon Jackson. So Loudon Jackson bringing 2 cars. Good old Brad Smith. More or less, Brad's going to get some extra laps Brad's going to get some extra laps on the Ford. Obviously, they haven't ran the Ford in a long time. And they just kind of want to get some more laps on the car, get used to the car, get more of a setup for the car. But yeah, the 48 is showing up, but expect that to be a start and park. He will not be running the whole race. Tanner Arms in the 95. Good to see them. Good to see the 95 team back last year. They did run a couple of races. And of course, Dale Shear in the 98. And then the 01 of Dallas Fruet and the 06 of Nate Muller. Yes, the Peterson team are there as well. So 16 cars. Our starting parks will be the 12, 48, 01, and 06, more than likely. So I would expect out of our 16 entries, 4 will start in park, 12 will run the whole distance. And I know, that's not the biggest field. That's not, like I said, not exactly what we want to see. I understand that, and I can understand that to an extent. Like I said, for the last race we had A year ago, we had only 11 going the whole distance. So you could say to some extent, we're doing a little bit better than we did last year. But I think when you look at last year's race results to this year's entry list, I just think we're going to have more overall competitors for the win. Because in last year's race, I mean, the only three people that legitimately had a shot, or the only people that legitimately had a shot at this race for a win, was the 18, the 02, the 17, and the 1. Those were the only four guys that had a legitimate chance at this. The others were there to fill the field or to get a top 5. They did not have a logistical chance of winning that race. It just wasn't going to happen. You looked at practice speeds, qualifying speeds, it was not going to happen. But this year, you look at the entry list this year, I mean, you got LeVar, you got Hingarani, you got Sawalich, you got Finch, you got Fenhouse, you got Riff. That's 6 quality drivers and cars that could, not only run for a top 5, but win the race. I mean, any of those guys I just listed could win this race. And then you got, the competitive, you got your competitive mid-packers. You got Tinkle there and Tanner Arms. I mean, they could be right up there competing for top 10s, for a high top 10 finish as well, maybe 6th and 7th. Then you got Smotherman in there for another top 10 finish. So, while you will have your back markers, you will have your starting parks, I definitely think that this East race will be decent. Like I said, we got our competitive cars, we will have our stragglers, and we will have our starting parks, but that's just kind of what you got to expect out of the ARCA East series. Like I said, I said it at the top of the show, if there's one series in ARCA that really needs some work, it is the ARCA East series. And I'm curious, for everyone in the chat right now, I'm curious what you guys would do with the ARCA East series. Like I said, my idea with it really was about 11 to 13 races, and go to tracks on the East Coast that the main series does not go to. You can maybe have 1 or 2 combo races, but not like 4. Maybe have the Iowa combo race, maybe have the Milwaukee combo race, but then have the rest of the schedule be tracks that the main series doesn't go to. You can even go back to New Smyrna just at a different time in the schedule. Maybe go to Motor Mile Speedway. There's just a lot of other good tracks in here. I just can't think of any off the top of my head right now because I'm not familiar with a lot of the short track things. I mean, heck, maybe they could even go to Slinger. I mean, that'd be cool to see the ARCA East cars at Slinger. That'd be something if ARCA went to Slinger. I don't know if that'd be a good idea or not, but ARCA East at Slinger, man, that'd be something. I feel like that would get a sellout. ARCA at Slinger, that's not a bad idea. I wish that could happen. But yeah, like I said, with our 16-car entry list, the payouts for this race, last place is $1,150. First place is $5,000, but with all the contingency awards that come with winning an ARCA race, total money for first would be $12,750. Second place is $6,325, and third place is $4,050. Now, of course, you'll have your people be like, "Oh, those payouts are crap." Just know, late models is way worse than that most of the time. You won't get many late model races that pay out more than $10,000 or $15,000, and most of the time, last place is about $1,000 to $500. So, ARCA is still in line with about late models for payouts, and realistically, you could look at late models in this day and age are costing about the same, if not even more, than ARCA cars nowadays, with how expensive late model racing, especially professional late model racing, has become. I think we can all agree on that. But yeah, overall for this race, my pick for winning the race, I'm actually going to go with the 20 of Jake Finch as my pick to win the race. My underdog pick for winning, I will take the 28 of Luke Fenhouse. In terms of the championship this season, like I said, a lot of unknowns. We know William's young. He's got plenty of car experience still. We know that. But, we did notice at Phoenix, you go back to Phoenix, he was doing just fine out front. But when William did get into lap traffic or, the back of the field, he got through the field, but it took him a while. And I'm just wondering, now that we're back on tracks, more his size, more what he's used to, what will he do? Obviously we know the JGR team is without a doubt probably the best team in the ARCA garage from financially to parts and overall performance. They're without a doubt probably the best team. Venturini is a very, very close second, but I do not put them ahead of Joe Gibbs just because of pretty much from a financial standpoint. I think Venturini can be just as competitive, but I mean, let's face it, from a financial standpoint, Gibbs is number one. But on a track like this, with Jake Finch, who's been around this track probably just as much as Solich, him, maybe even more than him, he's got more laps than him here in an ARCA car. I feel like that'll be an advantage as well, with Jake being here in an ARCA car more than William. But like I said, for the championship, you kind of got like a lot of rookies coming in here with no experience, and that's what I like. William, LeVar, Luke, Tyler, and Sean, they're all coming in with no experience really at any of these tracks. Any of these tracks you see on the ARCA East schedule, none of these guys really have any experience on the track as in general. So to that extent, you could honestly say that it's kind of a wide open slate. Yes, the 18 might overall have the better speed, but still the lack of experience for any of these guys on any of these tracks. Yeah, the 28 and cars like the 6 and the 28 and the 15 might not have the exact same speed as the 18, but the lack of experience all across the board, I feel like will put it at a very even playing field that honestly we cannot decide a champion right now for the ARCA East division. And I don't think we can even decide a champion maybe until we either see a definitive points gap or we see a something big happening at one of the combo races. I think even after Flat Rock, the four main East races, I still predict the championship will be pretty close. Of course, last year in the ARCA East series, like I said, the series kind of got worse as the year went on. The combo races made up for it. Iowa was good, Milwaukee was good, and Bristol was good. But that was mainly because we had the combo cars. And even at Iowa, we only had, I think it was only 3 or 4 East guys. Milwaukee, we only had the 3 East guys, and Bristol, same. I mean, it really wasn't even an East combo race. It was more of just the same guys you would expect anyway. But New Smyrna had 16 cars. Pensacola had technically 16, but one withdrew. Dover only had 15, and the Nashville race only had 14. And, for the people who have been watching every show, we heavily criticized that Nashville race last year, and Dover. Those 2 races last year, like I said, I try to remain as positive as I can for you guys on this channel. But, when a race is bad, we got to call it out. And it's not like it was just a bad race. It was just a lack of competitive cars just made it no good. Just made it no good. And Sammy Smith just dominated. He won last year. Sammy won 5 of the 7 races, including the combo events. The only 2 he didn't win were Dover and Iowa. And even in those races, Iowa, he finished 2nd last year, the race I was at, and he finished 5th at the Dover race last year. And I really point that to just a lack of experience at a track like Dover. But I feel like, you talk about with how fast-paced Dover is. Will a guy like Luke Fenhaus, who's used to slippery tracks like Slinger, will that actually be an advantage for a guy like him going to a track like Dover? And that's what I want to look at for this season. Like, yeah, William Solich might have the best prepared car with overall speed, but you also got to look at the other guys in the field and what their strengths at these specific tracks will be. LeVar Scott, we know he's won races in the Rev Racing late model program. We know he's won races. He's a very successful driver. He's ran the high banks at Daytona, so he knows car control. He knows how to keep a car stable. He knows how to keep a car pointing in the right direction. Sean Hingorani, it's kind of a tall task for him. And, for Tyler Reff, I feel like they're the real underdogs here. both with minimal experience. Sean only has about 6 ARCA starts in general, and Tyler only has literally about 3 ARCA starts. But of course, we know from what it appears that Loudon Jackson bought or purchased most of the DGR Ford ARCA fleet and will be running pretty much ex-DGR cars most of the year in both series. Which I think right there really puts him as a championship favorite. I mean, if you have Tyler basically driving the same cars that Taylor Gray was driving last year, I mean, what does that tell you? What does that tell you right there? That they're immediately going to be competitive. And as we know, really DGR's 17 car with Gray was literally Sammy Smith's only contender. I mean, yeah, Leland Honeyman would be up there for a couple laps, but just the 0-2 overall just didn't have the whole race speed in it, and it just did not perform well. But yeah, for this season, like I said, I'm really excited for tracks. More excited for Flat Rock. Flat Rock, I mean, we're going to get a lot of full-time entries from the main series that will be there as well. That is actually the same day as the truck race from Wilkesboro. So that's going to be kind of the sad part. That's ARCA's return to Flat Rock for the first time, I think, in over 20 years. And it's on the same day as the Wilkesboro race. So while you're watching the Wilkesboro, for the people who have Flow Racing, while you're watching the Wilkesboro truck race, don't forget to watch the ARCA East race. Flat Rock, because that one will have some heavy hitters. That ARC East race might even have DNQs. That many cars are expected for Flat Rock. So, but in terms of Flat Rock and the combo races, it's the first 3 of what I'm a little concerned about. We do know that the Dover race, for some strange reason, I've said it every year, for some strange reason, the Dover East race pays very well. I think like last place last year paid $4,000, which, I mean, that's usually what the top 5 pays. So, and like 10th place paid out like $5,000. 5th place was like $7,000. So I think there could be some more incentive this year to run the Dover race, mainly due to purse money. It was confirmed to me by Zachary Tinkle that Andy Hillenberg will be running all 4 cars again, full-time ARCA East, which in reality is only 4 standalone races, and then you got the 4 combo races, which would mean that at the combo races, Fast Track, if you combine Veer Motorsports, which is John Garrett's team, but prepared by Fast Track, that technically Fast Track will have 5 cars at Iowa, Milwaukee, IRP, and Bristol. So you talk about stretching thin for Andy Hillenberg, but if there's one guy who can do it, it's definitely Andy Hillenberg. He's got a great group of guys under him, that's for sure. But yeah, in terms of Brad Smith, I'm not sure if Brad Smith's going to run the whole series. They did reach out to him if he was going to run the full-time ARCA East series again. I talked to him about it as well. He wasn't very interested in it, but the real reason why is sometimes ARCA calls him and tells him if they kind of need an extra car. So they kind of tell Brad, hey, sometimes we'll pay for your travel, have you show up. I mean, that's what they've done for Brad in the past. They did that for a couple races for him last year too. They kind of paid for his travel just so, they can get an extra car there just to make the field look a little bit nicer. You understand. Sometimes you got to do that from time to time. But I wouldn't expect Brad to be at every single race this year. However, for the Flat Rock race, I know Brad wants to be at Flat Rock because I think he was one of the few guys that was in that race that is still going in ARCA. And with the DNQs that are expected for that race, it wouldn't shock me if Brad actually ends up running full-time ARCA East just because he's going to need the owner points. He's going to need the owner points for a possible provisional when they go to Flat Rock. That's how many cars. Again, Flat Rock is going to be a big race. That's how many cars are expected to show up for Flat Rock. That Brad, I could see him running full-time ARCA East just to get the provisionals. But again, that'll depend, obviously, down the line. And it's also more aligned just to get laps on the 48 Ford. I would bet that the 06 was called up by ARCA. We have seen that before, where they sometimes call him in to get an extra car. Nate Moeller is the main crew chief on the car. Guy works his effing ass off. I mean, if you want a guy who's works hard for Peterson. I mean, Nate Muller's your guy. He's a good guy, and it's good to see him, even if it's just a couple of starting parks. Anytime you get to see a guy like him behind the wheel, kind of makes you heart because, same with Tim Monroe, guys who, they're hardworking mechanics, but anytime they can get behind the wheel, it's good to see because it's good to see hard work pay off. So, but yeah, I would expect Nate to run probably 2 or 3 laps, no more than that. Brad will probably run, let's see if it's a 200 lapper, probably around 30, 40 laps, close to almost about half a fuel run at that track would be. Monroe, around the same time, around 11 laps. Dallas, I would expect Nate will be the first. If you want to give me an order to pull off, I would say Nate will be the first to pull off, then Dallas, then Tim, then Brad. And even in general, when you look at the payout list, 12th place or 13th place to 16th place is only a difference of $75. Literally is only a difference of $75 in purse money. So it's not like finishing any higher than each other would get the team more money. Yeah, so also wishing for a speedy recovery for D.L. Wilson. We know he is out of the hospital by now. That's the good news. We know D.L. Wilson's out of the hospital. He will miss this race, of course. But the next ARCA East race isn't until the end of April in Dover. And we still got, like I said, over a month until then. So hopefully DL will be cleared for that race by Dover. Wouldn't shock me if we see some Xfinity guys in that field again just to get some extra track time. We have seen that in the past before. Hopefully we see it again because, sometimes that 20-minute practice session just ain't enough. It would be nice if we could see some late model guys in this race. I think we saw one year we had I think it's Stephen Nassy. He was in this race a couple years ago. Caden Honeycutt was in this race a couple years ago. There was another guy like at 14. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he was in this race. Be nice if Connor O'Kresick. Yeah, he was in the 14. Be nice if we saw some more late model guys in this field and gals as well. Like if we saw Butterbean, imagine Butterbean in the ARCA race here. That would be pretty cool. Guys like Landon Huffman in this race. We know Landon likes to run ARCA cars as well. It'd just be nice, but like I said, the incentive for ARCA East, it's just not there. It's not there yet. Could it get there? I hope so. But are we there right now? No. Unfortunately, in my personal opinion, there is just not enough incentive for these teams to run ARCA East. Even with sponsorship, there's just no incentive because at the end of the day, it's only 16 cars. What are you going to do out there? If you don't have a shot to win and you're going to run 8th and you're not going to run around anyone and you're just going to be in the way, like I said, there's more incentives for these teams to go to a 25-car ARCA race where you will have cars to race around your own pace and be in front of a live audience because all the ARCA races this year will be in front of live audiences, either on FS1, of course, or FS2. Whereas these ARCA East races are just on Flow Racing, and then we'll have tape-delayed broadcasts. I believe they'll have tape-delayed broadcasts on TV, but again, just nobody really watches those. It's a very small audience that watches those. Now, obviously, it's hard to get deals. That's why I wish the Speed Channel was still around. I think if there's one thing I miss, it's the Speed Channel, because if the Speed Channel was still around today, well, then maybe we could get some of these ARCA East and West races put on live. But unfortunately, with no Speed Channel, it's just not going to happen. And I feel like you mix the no live TV, pretty much the same tracks that the main series is running. I mean, yeah, they don't run Pensacola. Yeah, they don't run Dover or Nashville or Flat Rock, but they could if they wanted to. In reality, Five Flags, Nashville, and Dover, as I said, the incentive just isn't there. And it sucks. It sucks because, like I said, there's potential in all of these series. It can work. But unfortunately, for a series like this to work, you need the incentive. You need that it factor of what makes the E Series special. Why should we run the E Series more than the main series division? And unfortunately, when you're an ARCA team and you look at it, really the only incentive I could see is just the only incentive I can see is if you're just low budget, but you're still looking for a championship run. That's where I can see some incentive for the East Series, like what Dale Scheer is doing. Dale Scheer is returning to ARCA. He will be running some main division races, but for him running full-time ARCA East, it allows him to set a schedule of what he wants to do for the year. So you could say, like, to some extent, the ARCA East division, I feel like, is more in favor of the lower tier organizations, unfortunately, rather than the higher tier organizations. And it's still thankful that we have teams, this many competitive teams in the ARCA East division. And we still have these caliber of drivers. I mean, you talk about, for a series that is not doing the best, the caliber of drivers we have in the field is very good. It is definitely very good. I am curious to see how Rita Goulet performs. We were a little critical of her on our podcast last year. Her performance at Watkins Glen was not good. Her performances at Mid-Ohio and Berlin were not very good. She was pretty off the pace at Milwaukee. That was a starting park there as well. So I'm curious, now that she's gotten some laps under her belt, some testing at Hickory, what speed will we see out of her? I hope we see some pretty decent speed out of her. I'm sure it'll be a full race effort because the team like this, I don't expect them to start in park, at least not the first race of the season. They could start in park, maybe a race down the line. But I'm curious to see the performance out of Rita Goulet, if it improves from last year. Like I said, Solich, how will he do? I mean, you got a lot of pressure on you. You got 20 races this year. You didn't win the first one, not because it was his fault. I mean, he got wrecked. But, you can definitely say William is coming into this race with a vengeance because he wants to win the race that he probably lost at Phoenix back for this one. As for Tyler Reff, he wants to go 2 for 2. Become, I think, did he set a record for the youngest winner in West Series history? If not, he was close. But he also wants to hopefully reset the record for the youngest East winner in history. So for Tyler Reff, man, you got a lot of incentive here. And yeah, I mean, even though we have a small field, nobody can really afford a bad run. It's first race of the season. You want to have a good run for the championship. And like I said, early title picks, though, and like I said, it's hard to pick a title pick right now because, it's the very first race of the season. We haven't seen any of the races yet, so it's hard to tell what teams like LeVar Scott, Luke Fenhouse will have up against the 41 and the 18. How will Hingarani do in this race? Will Zachary Tinkle pull off an upset? We don't know. So it's hard to judge right now. I feel like in next week's show, after the first race of the season, we'll have more of a judgment of what the season will look like. But early championship right now, I would have to say it's definitely going to be either between the 41 or the 18. But like I said, we could be proven wrong for sure. Well, yeah, guys, that's kind of today's preview show. Like I said, not the longest episode, but I still thank you guys for joining me on this February. Again, that's how lost I am tonight. March 22nd. I hope you guys enjoyed your day. Thank you guys for tuning in to me tonight. Again, not the longest show, but we'll have a bigger show next week with our East Series review of Pensacola. And of course, don't forget to join me tomorrow live again at 7 p.m., not 6 p.m., 7 p.m. Central Time tomorrow for backmarker battles. Boy, do we have a lot to talk about tomorrow. So I would not miss tomorrow's backmarker battles episode. But till then, you guys have a great rest of your Wednesday night. Continue to like and subscribe to the channel. We just hit over 1,030 subs. And yeah, I will catch you guys tomorrow at 7 p.m. So you guys have a good night. I'm Colby Evans, Start and Park Car, signing off. So long, guys.